Welcome to NTD News. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at today's top stories. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says they'll take up the Senate's version of the relief bill by Wednesday. How soon could we see the stimulus checks? The Department of Homeland Security is asking its staff to volunteer to assist with a surge in migrants at the southern border. Experts say President Biden's policies are fueling a spike in illegal immigration. The White House is granting new protections to those fleeing Venezuela. He says those already in the U.S. can stay and work legally for a year and a half. Representative Steve Scalise says disabled students are hit hard by school closures. He's reaching across the aisle to ask Democrats for help getting them back to school and restoring needed services. And Trump demands the GOP stop using his name to raise money, but the Republican Party is not listening, saying that it can legally use his name. An update on President Biden's nearly $2 trillion relief package. Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House will take up the Senate's version by Wednesday.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says lawmakers will vote on the Senate's $1.9 trillion virus relief package by Wednesday.
We'll be having a further discussion about this bill as we move forward to its passage in the next 48 hours.
Democrats aim to enact the bill by Sunday. That's when enhanced federal unemployment benefits are set to expire. The Senate passed its version after an overnight vote on Saturday. It got rid of the House's $15 minimum wage hike. It also expanded joblessness assistance through August. Republican Senator Tim Scott told Fox News the bill is a progressive payment plan for cities, states, and prisoners.
Less than 10% goes to COVID relief. In other words, as Bernie Sanders said it, this is the most progressive piece of legislation to pass the Senate since he's been a senator.
It's the only virus relief bill to pass without Republican support. If the House approves it, it will make its way to Biden's desk to be signed into law. Tax experts say once Biden signs it, the government should be able to send out the $1,400 checks almost immediately. Some might see direct payments as soon as this week. One vast undertaking is the child tax credit. Biden's bill increases it by $1,000. Taxpayers with children 17 or under would get monthly payments. But tax expert Nina Olson says figuring out whether the children actually live with their parents could hold up those payments.
The White House is extending protection and residency to several 100,000 Venezuelan refugees. They fled their country to escape its economic collapse.
The temporary protection status will apply to an estimated 320,000 Venezuelans. It will also allow those already in the U.S. to apply for legal work permits and live in the country for a year and a half. The Biden administration will also review U.S. sanctions placed on Venezuela. They were first put in place under President Obama and ramped up significantly under President Trump. The penalties target the country's oil sector in an effort to remove socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro from power. He took over in 2018 after what more than 50 countries have labeled a fraudulent election. Venezuela's rampaged economy has been struggling for several years, marked by food, medicine, and electricity shortages. An estimated 5 million have fled, both to neighboring countries and South Florida. To be eligible, Venezuelans must be in the U.S. by Monday, show continued residence, and pass a criminal background check. Both moves indicate a shift in U.S. foreign policy under President Biden.
The Department of Homeland Security is asking staff to assist Customs and Border Protection with an overwhelming surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas sends the request as President Biden denies there is a crisis.
Mayorkas sent an email to his staff asking them to assist at the border. He says the southwest border is facing a surge in migration as an overwhelming number of migrants are trying to cross over to the U.S. On his first day in office, Biden signed executive orders reversing several Trump-era immigration policies. And Biden says he wants to legalize 11 million illegal immigrants. Experts say Biden's immigration policies are attracting migrants and fueling a crisis.
If that is the message that we send to Central America and around the world, I can assure you it won't be long before we have tens of thousands of people showing up to our border, and it'll be catastrophic.
Former ICE Director Thomas Homan says Biden made the whole country a sanctuary jurisdiction. He says migrants know they won't be deported if they can get across the border. Border Patrol reports nearly 80% more incidents over the same time last year. Texas is sending National Guard troops to the border to stop smuggling operations. Homeland Security staff assisting at the border will act as volunteers to provide humanitarian assistance. But Biden says there isn't a crisis at the border. He says, quote, "we'll be able to handle it."
A sheriff in Texas claims the Biden administration is doing something that's never been done before in U.S. history. It's contacting asylum seekers who've been rejected and encouraging them to reapply. According to Texas Sheriff A.J. Louderback, the U.S. southern border is more open now than ever in U.S. history. He says new policies by the Biden administration are sending a message to the world that our borders are open. He says Americans will have to pay a price for that. What's more, Louderback says the current administration is now doing something unprecedented in regards to asylum seekers.
This is the first time in U.S. history where the federal government has gone back on rejected asylee applicants in the last year or so, and are reaching out to them to bring them back into the United States and reapply again for asylee status under the Biden administration.
Louderback is the sheriff for Jackson County. It's on a main migrant route from Central America through the Rio Grande Valley and into Houston. He said over the last 2 years when Trump was in office, the border was more secure than it had been in half a century, partly because of Trump's Remain in Mexico program.
So the Trump administration simply said, no, we're going to do migrant protection protocols as we're allowed to do by law, and we're going to do the asylum process, but you're going to have to stay in another country and then make application into the U.S. and then be brought in into an orderly fashion.
But Louderback says Biden completely changed that and is letting migrants into the country, whether they are seeking asylum or not. The sheriff says for the last 3 weeks, over 1,000 people a day are coming across the Rio Grande Valley into the country. And he says the migrants have to pay the Gulf cartel $250 US to get to the border. Louderback does the math.
You're looking at $250,000 a day coming in and funding the cartel for its future violence and future enhancement of all things criminal that go along here in Texas and the United States. So fundamentally, what we've done is promote this. We're allowing the cartels to fund themselves, enrich themselves at the cost of these people.
Louderback says Americans should be concerned about this, and a public outcry can help bring about a resolution. Kevin Hogan, NTD News. The family of the woman shot dead inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th is considering a lawsuit against the officer who shot her. The officer is reportedly in hiding. Air Force veteran Ashley Babbitt was shot as she attempted to climb through a broken window into the Speaker's lobby. It was the only shooting during the breach. A lawyer for Babbitt's family says the lawsuit would allege constitutional violations that include excessive use of force. U.S. Capitol Police confirmed a sworn officer shot Babbitt. An attorney for the officer told Real Clear Investigations that the officer was acting within his training. The officer has not been identified by officials or in news reports. He is reportedly in hiding out of fear for his safety. Trump is taking aim at RINOS by demanding the GOP stop using his name to raise money. He issued a fiery statement Monday after the party brushed off his demand. Here are the details.
No more money for RINOS, says former President Trump in a message to supporters. He called on them to stop supporting so-called Republicans in name only who aren't on board with his America Great agenda. Instead, he's asking supporters to donate to his website and Save America PAC and not the RNC. Trump said RINOS do nothing but hurt the Republican Party and our great voting base. They will never lead us to greatness. Trump's letter appears to come in response to the RNC's actions. A GOP lawyer said the party plans to keep using Trump's name in marketing material, going against Trump's request. One of Trump's lawyers sent a cease and desist letter to the RNC and to the committees responsible for electing Republicans to the House and Senate. An advisor to Trump said the three groups irked the former president by supporting Republicans who voted to impeach him. Yet the GOP argued it has every right to refer to public figures like Trump because that kind of political speech is protected under the First Amendment. But a member of the Trump Campaign Advisory Board told the Epoch Times why they want to cut funding for RINOS. He said,
RINOS no longer have a home in the Republican Party. The Trump doctrine of America First is here to stay. The America First agenda has put a stop to the ruthless exploitation of American workers. We openly embrace American exceptionalism and believe America belongs to Americans. We put America first and foremost. The redirected money would allow Trump to support candidates in the primaries who will challenge Republicans who voted to impeach him.
Former President Trump also told the National Republican Senatorial Committee and the National Republican Congressional Committee not to raise funds using his likeness. A group of lawmakers is introducing a bill to let Americans sue foreign countries for cyber attacks in American courts. The bill follows the massive attack on software company SolarWinds. The Homeland and Cyber Threat Act would remove immunity for foreign governments. That includes their officials, employees, or agents. Americans could then sue them for damages that stem from a cyber attack. This comes as U.S. intelligence agencies are reviewing the SolarWinds hack. It's believed to be the biggest cyber attack ever uncovered. Intelligence agencies say Russia is likely responsible. The bill is co-sponsored by both Republicans and Democrats. Under both the Trump administration and now the Biden administration, the Justice Department has been cracking down on cyber attacks by hackers in Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Republican Representative Steve Scalise and a group of House Republicans write to their Democrat colleagues about how school closures affect students with disabilities. They say districts across the nation are breaking federal student disability laws. The letter calls for Democrats to join an immediate bipartisan investigation into the impact school closures have on children with disabilities. Schools are supposed to comply with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Representative Steve Scalise says, unfortunately, students with disabilities are falling behind. States and localities are not meeting even the minimal requirements. He says children with disabilities are bearing the greatest burden as schools remain closed. His letter includes stories from parents of children who haven't gotten services for almost a year as their behavior and mental health deteriorate. One case is a mother of 3 in Oregon whose daughter Lizzie has Down syndrome. The mother says Lizzie's frustrations maxed out quickly. By the 3rd week, she threw the Chromebook away. Lizzie's mom says after relentless efforts from her parents, Lizzie was the first in their district to return to some limited in-person learning, but it was and is limited. No friends, no teachers, no therapies. Scalise says the same thing is happening all over the country. According to the Department of Education, there are more than 7 million students with disabilities in the United States. A CDC report says there was a 66% increase in mental emergencies among school-age children in 2020. Scalise and the Republicans say the science is clear that it is safe to have kids in school. They want the Biden administration to do more to get schools open. Pro-life evangelicals for Biden are telling the president that they feel used and betrayed by him. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
The pro-life group said they publicly endorsed Biden's candidacy with the understanding that he would engage with them on abortion issues, especially the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment stops U.S. taxpayer dollars from going to abortion services, but now it's excluded from the COVID relief package. Pro-life evangelicals for Biden are saying they feel used and betrayed. They sent this letter to the president on Sunday. We are very disappointed about the COVID-19 relief package's exclusion of the Hyde Amendment, a long-standing bipartisan policy that prevents taxpayer funding for abortion. We're even more upset that the Biden administration is supporting this bill. Their letter drew unsympathetic responses from a number of religious conservatives, including pro-life activist Lila Rose. She said on Twitter, it was extremely naive to trust them, referring to the Biden administration, and called Biden a master deceiver. NTD spoke with Rose last month. She said many Americans aren't aware of the Biden administration's extreme abortion positions because Biden uses his faith as a cover.
The president is using the Christian religion as a cover for his extreme policies and his promotion of abortion. And that is simply the worst kind of lie.
Last month, Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked if the White House could guarantee pro-life Americans that their tax dollars would not go towards abortion through the relief package. But Psaki refused to answer.
As I've just noted, 3/4 of the public supports the components of the package, wants to see the pandemic get under control, wants to see people put back to work, vaccines and arms. So I think that answers your question. Okay, we're going to move on.
According to a January 27th Knights of Columbus Morris poll, 58% of Americans polled oppose taxpayer-funded abortions in the U.S. Pro-life evangelicals for Biden is urging Biden to honor his commitment to them and to immediately demand the House apply the Hyde Amendment to the relief package. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And just ahead, a California politician resigns over election fraud charges. He lied about his eligibility to serve and still faces sentencing. Americans are starting to enjoy a little bit of the pre-pandemic way of life as heavy lockdowns start to ease. People are heading out to do the activities they enjoy. Find out more after the break.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008. And it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever. Just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
The glory of piano masterpieces from the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods. New Tang Dynasty Television invites you to join the 2021 NTD International Piano Competition. Together, we preserve and revitalize the art of authentic classical piano music. October 2021 in New York City. Register now at piano.ntdtv.com.
Someone has to find the way to build the Great Dome. Completely new, completely original.
Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is calling on power grid operator ERCOT to correct a $16 billion pricing error during the week of the storm. This mistake led to power outages across the state. The mid-February storm temporarily knocked out up to half of the state's generating plants and pushed power prices to 10 times the normal rate. This left much of the state's power market in a deep financial crisis. One company filed for bankruptcy and a dozen face removal from the state's grid for defaulting on power payments. Last week, an independent market monitor said that ERCOT made the pricing error. It kept market prices too high for more than a day after widespread outages had already ended. But the commission that oversees ERCOT refused to correct the charges. They say even a partial repricing could have unintended effects. A politician in California is resigning after pleading guilty to election fraud. NTD's Eileen Eng has more.
The mayor pro tempore of Crescent City in Northern California has resigned after pleading guilty to making a false declaration of candidacy. According to local reports last week, Alex Campbell submitted a form to the Del Norte County clerk last August, saying his current address was within the city limits when his actual residence was outside Crescent City's boundaries. He faces 2 felony counts of perjury and 1 count of false declaration of candidacy. However, the Del Norte County District Attorney agreed to dismiss the perjury charges. He also faces 2 years of felony probation, fines of up to $20,000, and a restitution fine of up to $10,000. Campbell was elected to the Crescent City Council on November 3rd. He then became mayor pro tem in December. He is scheduled to appear in court for sentencing on April 15th. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
One California man has been leading a road trip across the state to recall the governor since February. Here's NTD's David Lamb at one of the stops at San Francisco's City Hall.
Organizers of the Recall Newsom campaign say they've accumulated enough signatures to trigger a special election later this year. The recall petition is approaching 2 million signatures with a deadline in less than 2 weeks. It partnered with the Recall road trip, which started from Santa Monica Pier and made its way to San Francisco today, with its last stop in Sacramento. Let's hear what supporters have to say.
The Recall road trip, the idea behind it was we wanted to go up the coast and collect signatures to help boost the efforts to recall Gavin Newsom.
Joe Collins, the man who's leading the road trip, says it's not Republican-driven.
We've been working with Democrats, Republicans, independents, and people who don't even identify with any party, but they're just tired of the way our state is looking.
One of the attendees has been speaking at the recall rallies since last year.
The reason we need to recall this guy is because America is about not one size fitting one type of person. It's supposed to fit everybody. It's supposed to work for everybody. And that's not happening under his leadership.
A young attendee was vocal about not being able to see friends from school.
And we need to get a good guy in there who actually has morals and principles. Because I doubt Gavin has any principles. I'm sorry, but it just has to be said.
Becerra says he wants an era of freedom where people are equal.
But we need to be honest and loyal, and we need to go back to school. That's our main thing. We all hate it. No one likes it.
One supporter says the Democratic Party has tried to get Newsom as well as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi out of office for years. One of the co-organizers of the petition says the next step is educating people about the special election process, which may happen in fall or summer.
There's a couple of days after the vote takes place. If the state chooses a new governor, then that person would be sworn in almost immediately.
NTD reached out to Governor Newsom's office for comment, but we did not receive a response. The final deadline for signatures is March 17th. Then the organizers have 30 business days to verify those signatures. After a review process, a special statewide election can be held that could pull Newsom out of office. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Greyhound is calling on the Department of Homeland Security to prove that all detainees released by ICE test negative for the virus before they board its buses. Greyhound CEO David Leach says the bus line's top priority is the health and safety of employees and passengers, and that this is an issue of public safety. Leach sent a letter to DHS last week, just as it was revealed that at least 108 illegal immigrants released in Texas had tested positive for the virus. Leach is asking the department for assistance with a potential surge in migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. He says with the pandemic, the company doesn't have enough buses or drivers to cope and says they will need emergency funding. Cities and states are loosening restrictions as new CCP virus cases recede and the rollout of vaccines accelerates. And people are enjoying a taste of their old lives again, with New Yorkers going to movie theaters and people in San Francisco dining indoors.
Across the U.S., Americans are getting a taste of post-pandemic life. Over the past weekend, New Yorkers watched movies on the big screen. People in San Francisco dined indoors, and in Florida, spring breakers were out in full force.
We love Miami. We out here.
With cities and states loosening restrictions as new COVID-19 cases recede and the rollout of vaccines accelerates, people are enjoying a taste of their old lives again.
It feels amazing. It feels really good. I'm excited. I decided to not work today and I just came to the theater. As soon as I read that movie theaters were open, I got a ticket literally 10 minutes later.
He isn't the only one feeling upbeat. In just 1 month, the mood in the United States has rebounded from an 8-year low to the highest level recorded by Reuters Ipsos polls that date back to 2012. But amid the reopenings, it has not entirely been business as usual. San Francisco restaurants remain restricted to 25% capacity inside, Chicago at 50%, while in New York, movie houses opened last week to 25% capacity with no more than 50 people per screen, following state guidelines. Health officials warned that despite the rollbacks and the improvement in COVID cases, Americans should still be cautious and continue to wear masks.
Harley-Davidson has decided the best way to get younger customers to buy a new motorcycle is to sell them a used one first.
Harley-Davidson can't rest its laurels on its fiercely loyal but aging fan base, so it's taking a page from automakers. Next month, the iconic American motorcycle maker will begin selling certified pre-owned bikes aimed at capturing younger buyers. Its program, HD Certified, marks its first entry into the used marketplace in the U.S. More than 300 dealers have expressed interest in participating. It's part of Harley's new strategy aimed at expanding the brand's appeal beyond middle-aged and affluent riders. Harley needs to attract new riders. The 118-year-old brand has been steadily losing market share in the U.S. Retail sales have fallen for 6 years. Used Harleys are less expensive and demand for pre-owned bikes is strong. Some dealers told Reuters used Harleys outsold new ones last year by 3-1. And J.D. Power data shows Harley was the most sought-after brand in the market for used bikes last year. Under the new program, Harley will certify motorcycles up to 5 years of age with up to 25,000 miles. They'll be inspected and backed by a 12-month limited warranty.
And coming up, we take you to Hong Kong, where a new bride says she's the only one in her wedding photo who still has their freedom. Her husband and the rest of her wedding party have been detained by Chinese authorities. And the U.S. looks to establish $30 billion worth of missiles in the Indo-Pacific. That's to deter Chinese aggression. Find out more in just a minute. A new bride in Hong Kong says she's the only one left free after her family was torn apart by Chinese authorities. Her husband is now one of many detained there, amid Beijing's sweeping arrests of pro-democracy lawmakers and activists. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the story.
And more on the situation in Hong Kong. A new bride who just had her wedding in January is now the only free person in the wedding photo. Her husband and friends have all been detained by the Chinese regime. 55 pro-democratic activists were involved in organizing the 2020 Hong Kong pro-democracy primaries. Beijing claimed the primaries are illegal and charged 47 of the activists for, quote, conspiracy to subvert state power. Nicole Yu's husband and their friends are among the 47 people. Last Thursday, Yu arrived at a detention center in Hong Kong. She was hoping to see her detained husband, Lester Shum, but he was already transferred to a prison, alongside with other 8 pro-democracy activists. Yu did not get notified until she had waited there for an hour. Yu posted on Facebook her wedding photo from January. She was with her husband and their friends. But now she is the only one who is still free. Yu wrote in the caption, "On January 25th, I was so happy to take photos with you guys. We were laughing and saying we had a lot of fun after the wedding ceremony, but now I'm the only one left." The media's attention is turning towards China's economic growth. The country's 2.3% growth rate for 2020 has been widely touted by Western media, calling it by far the best performance of any major economy. The numbers show a slowdown from China's 6% or higher average in recent years. But a look at data from the country's National Bureau of Statistics shows some of the country's numbers don't quite add up. China's economy is mainly driven by a trio of factors: investment, consumer spending, and exports. The Chinese regime's latest report says its investment was up 2.9% in 2020 compared to 2019. But the country's investment, based on its fixed assets, is only over 51 trillion yuan. That's a major decrease from its 55 trillion in 2019. As for consumer spending, the regime reported a 3.9% decrease from last year. But the official report, coming in at 39 trillion yuan in consumer spending, is actually 4.8% less than 2019, a year marked by 41 trillion in spending. China's economic figures are notorious for proving inaccurate. There are even inconsistencies between official statistics as well. The regime has openly admitted to falsifying data, but usually blames the mistakes on local authorities. A New York Federal Reserve report shows that China's official numbers have become almost unrealistically smooth over time compared to authentic data, making them less believable.
The Chinese regime's alleged actions in Xinjiang have reportedly violated every single provision in the United Nations Genocide Convention. The accusation comes from an independent report by more than 50 global experts. The statement was released on Tuesday by the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy in Washington, D.C. In it, experts claim Beijing, quote, bears state responsibility for an ongoing genocide against the Uyghur in breach of the UN Genocide Convention. It's the first time a non-governmental organization has done an independent study of the topic, further bringing attention to the genocide accusations. A Chinese state-backed investment project worth $20 billion is crumbling. The funds were meant for the country's failing semiconductor industry. After struggling for a year, one of China's major microchip firms is asking employees to resign without compensation. NTD's Chen Han has more.
Major microchip maker Wuhan Hongxin Semiconductor, or HSMC, announced a full layoff of all its employees. The Chinese regime had poured nearly $20 billion into developing the company and its semiconductor industry. Stimulated by the government's subsidies and incentives, the industry boomed, with HSMC taking the lead. It was all part of an effort to combat U.S. sanctions, which blocked U.S. microchip technology from making its way to China. HSMC had said 10% of that investment was directly supplied by Wuhan's Dongxihu district. The company also claimed to independently own 14-nanometer chip technology, adding that it expected to be able to process 7-nanometer chips within a year. HSMC's projects were listed as major province-level projects in 2018 and 2019. But the company's problems soon started to go public, including a lack of funding and expertise, plus delayed projects. U.S.-based China affairs analyst Qin Peng says the Chinese regime had a hand in the industry's downfall.
As an innovative project, it actually requires a lot of time, personnel, and talented input. But these officials are all running after short-term political achievements, so they don't have the patience for that.
When the city of Wuhan finally took over HSMC, only a mere $1.5 million were left in its bank account. Soon after, local officials announced HSMC would be unable to continue production. After over a year in suspension, the possibility that the company could pick up where it left off has diminished, prompting the full layoffs. All staff members were required to resign by March 5th, but reports say hundreds of employees now refuse to leave. They say they're not satisfied with the terms of their resignation and that the company offered them no compensation plan or explanation. Former Huawei engineer Jin Chun says he expects a wave of more company collapses in China's semiconductor industry.
The CCP's totalitarian regime is not good for the high-end semiconductor industry. The regime is not suitable for technological innovation because it lacks a free and healthy cultural environment to promote it.
A report by the Semiconductor Industry International Association stated China would have the world's largest number of chip factories in 2021. But that prediction isn't looking good, as many related projects have already failed or been suspended, leaving much of the industry's billion-dollar equipment idle. Chen Han, NTD News.
The U.S. is strengthening its military presence in the waters of the Indo-Pacific. It's aimed at countering Communist China's increasing aggression in the region. NTD's Don Ma has more.
The U.S. is proposing a new tactic to deter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. A new network of missiles would cost close to $30 billion over 6 years. As per Japan-based newspaper Nikkei, the proposal said the military balance in the Indo-Pacific has become unfavorable for the U.S. It argued that without U.S. deterrence, China will have the courage to take military action in the region. Head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Philip Davidson, warned that the greatest danger the United States faces in the region is the erosion of deterrence to China. He added, quote, "We must be doing everything possible to deter conflict. Our number one job out here is to keep the peace, but we absolutely must be prepared to fight and win should competition turn to conflict." The plan comes in light of China's increased military presence in the South China Sea. Beijing claims sovereignty over much of the region and has built artificial islands and military outposts there. It has laid airstrips on them in an effort to strengthen its military capacity. An international tribunal deemed China's sweeping territorial claims unlawful in 2016, The tribunal said that China had violated international law by endangering ships in the area, as well as fishing and oil explorations. The proposal comes amid Beijing's plans to ramp up military spending. On Friday, China's Premier Li Keqiang announced a $200 billion investment plan for China's military for 2021. That's around a 7% increase from 2020's budget. As for the U.S., Congress approved a total defense budget of $690 billion for fiscal year 2021. Reporting by Don Ma, NTD News.
And soon we'll take you to England, where children return to in-person classes. The students are expected to get back to school after months of remote learning. It's the first step in Britain's plan to ease lockdowns. And people in France voice concerns over AstraZeneca's CCP virus vaccine. They're putting more trust in the vaccines made by other companies, but regulators say there's no need to worry. Stay tuned to find out more.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
The coronavirus outbreak is the latest wake-up call.
U.S. Senator Ben Sasse put it plainly, the Chinese Communist Party has lied, is lying, and will continue to lie about coronavirus to protect the regime.
In 5 to 10 years, we'll have virtually no manufacturing capacity left for generic drugs. And again, this is 90% of our medicines.
And the world should know, if Hong Kong falls, the whole world falls, okay? Because the Chinese Communist Party is the existential risk of humanity, period.
Since the CCP took power, 80 million people have died from its policies and political campaigns.
They're using our institutions and our norms and our values against us in ways that we hadn't necessarily envisioned towards their own authoritarian agenda.
From the party's great firewall in cyberspace, or to that great wall of sand in the South China Sea.
More repression, more unfair competition, more predatory economic practices, indeed a more aggressive military posture as well.
If we do not meet this threat now, it's going to define our century.
Vaccine producer Astrazeneca is working hard to calm side effect fears over use of its virus shot to people across Europe, with some still skeptical about taking it.
Despite multiple scientific studies saying the COVID-19 vaccine manufactured by AstraZeneca is safe and effective, some residents in Europe are turning down that particular shot. They include 60-year-old Nadine Roger, who lives in Paris. She's recovering from breast cancer and is in the high-risk category. She told Reuters, quote, "The AstraZeneca shot frightens me," and said she's prepared to wait for an alternative dose, despite wanting to get vaccinated as soon as possible.
The AstraZeneca vaccine requires 2 doses spaced 3 months apart. 3 months is a very long time, especially after a year of being deprived from going out. So the vaccine is not yet proven against variants. There's too little data on variants.
According to the most recent data made available by the French Health Ministry for the end of February, France was only using about a quarter of its AstraZeneca doses, compared with 82% for vaccines made by Pfizer-BioNTech and 37% for the Moderna shot. Partly due to logistical bottlenecks, but also because some French people don't trust the AstraZeneca shot because of concerns over side effects. European regulators have concluded the side effects caused by the AstraZeneca vaccine are not cause to doubt its safety. A study in Scotland covering 5.4 million people showed it and the Pfizer vaccine were highly effective in preventing severe infections. Student nurse Anais Mamol-Palacio views any reaction as minor and certainly not worse than getting the virus.
I got COVID, and I don't want to get it a second time. I'm 18 and I had to go to the emergency room. If I get it a second time, we don't know what can happen. I prefer to have less effects and just have the fever from Astrazeneca vaccine than to be on oxygen.
After initial concerns, France, Germany and Italy have changed tack and are now giving the Astrazeneca vaccine to people over 65.
Millions of English children and teenagers headed back to school on Monday for the first time in 2 months. They've just endured a second extended stretch of home learning because of a strict national lockdown. And home care residents can now see their first indoor visitors in months.
After months of remote learning, millions of English children and teenagers returned to school on Monday. The reopening of schools is the first step in a 4-stage government plan to ease the lockdown while trying to prevent a new surge in infections. New safety measures for pupils include regular hand washing, staggered arrival times, and social bubbles. For secondary schools, the requirements are more onerous, with teenagers being mass tested for COVID and required to wear masks in the classroom. The near consensus has been that getting children back to school is essential for their mental health, education, and life chances. Most pupils had missed out on more than 3 months of school in the spring and early summer of 2020, when Britain was under its first strict national lockdown. James Fisher is the head of Harris Academy in Sutton, England.
I think I'm seeing a lot of thrilled children, really grateful to be back in school, really thrilled to be getting back on with their learning, but we're prepared for any of the inconsistencies that might be thrown up in terms of their behaviour. We're prepared for that as well.
Things have also opened up for England's care home residents, who are now allowed one regular visitor. Nikki Clough was one of the first family members allowed back to the Alexander House home in Wimbledon, South London.
I'm going to leave you guys to it.
She had not been able to visit her mother, 87-year-old Pam Harrison, at the home since March 2020. Aside from a couple of meetings when Harrison had been admitted to hospital, all of Clough's interactions with her mother had been through the ground floor window. Now, the only barrier to connection is the comprehensive protective gear Clough has to wear. For adults in England, the lockdown remains in force, with social contact severely restricted. People are under stay-at-home orders, most shops are closed, and cafes and restaurants are only able to offer takeaway or delivery. The remaining 3 steps of the government's plan to ease the lockdown are due to kick in April, May and June, subject to a continued reduction of coronavirus infections.
And in the UK, the founder of the new Reclaim Party, Laurence Fox, announces his run for London mayor. We take a look at his motivation for running. NTD's Marianne Leatham has more.
Actor Laurence Fox is running for Mayor of London. Speaking to the Epoch Times programme, American Thought Leaders, he says he intends to reclaim free speech and a life free from lockdowns.
Similar to America, the United Kingdom is really struggling with their principle of freedom of speech. Without full and honest debate, we will end up in a place where the whole centre of gravity of democratic communication is shifted so heavily over to one side that it becomes very unstable.
He says woke ideology is affecting all areas of life, including the response to the pandemic. As mayor, he says he'd want to end the lockdown as soon as he's elected. Fox says that he's concerned about extreme political correctness undermining society.
One needs to accept that you have the right to offend and you do not have the right not to be offended. And it's through that conversation that mankind is going to actually progress.
He says while progressives have been focusing on the historical sins of Western countries, like slavery, they don't give as much attention to alleged genocide happening in modern-day China.
There's a desire to tear down what we are, rip it away and feel ashamed, but at the same time you'll allow a global superpower to commit horrendous acts of genocide against people, and it's fine. It's consistently inconsistent.
Fox gave Oxford University as an example of this inconsistency. The university is debating whether to remove a statue of Cecil Rhodes, a prominent figure in the building of the British Empire in South Africa. But last month, the Daily Mail reported that for a £700,000 donation, Oxford University named a professorship after a Chinese company with close links to the Chinese communist regime. The London mayoral election will be held on the 6th of May. Marianne Leatham, NTD News.
Former Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage says he's stepping down from frontline politics, but will remain active as an opinion leader.
Farage has in recent times been the leader of Reform UK, formerly known as the Brexit Party. He said on Saturday he'll quit as leader, but will still have an honorary position within the party. Having been an effective campaigning politician, Farage now wants to continue influencing British public opinion through media and social media. His top priority, to counter the infiltration of the Chinese Communist Party in the UK. He says the CCP's influence has been growing in Britain, but the British establishment has effectively sold out to it. He says a big educational campaign to inform the public of this worrying trend is needed, and he will fight for that. Farage is also concerned about the indoctrination of children in British schools. He says schools aren't teaching young people critical thinking. Instead, children are being politically propagandized. Campaigning for the health of oceans and encouraging people to plant more trees are also on his agenda.
And coming up, a veterinarian nurse in Australia cares for a koala with a missing foot, and a local doctor develops a new prosthetic foot for the little creature. Find out more in just a minute. Repairs for the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris are underway, and workers are not cutting corners, but they are cutting down hundreds of oak trees.
The spire of the Notre Dame Cathedral had defined the Paris skyline for more than 150 years. It collapsed during the fire in April 2019, but now work is underway to restore the icon. The original plan for the spire required roughly 1,000 oak beams, so many that the cathedral's roof was known as the forest. With so much wood needed, will the reconstruction be faithful to tradition? French President Emmanuel Macron says yes. The 315-foot spire will be reconstructed as originally designed in the 19th century. The wood must be of exceptional quality, from trees that have grown for 2 centuries. Such a tree is hard to come by and expensive. It would cost over $17,000 each.
It's perfectly straight. The axis of the wood is perfect. The heart of the wood is in the center, which will allow us to do the sawing and then make the piece for the future structure.
The fate of this trunk is a long beam that will help support the weight of the spire. These trees were selected at the beginning of the year. They must be chopped down before the end of March, or else the wood becomes too humid. They will dry for a year to a year and a half. Then they can be cut into shape and used in the new construction.
A London entrepreneur and a recycling manager are among the growing number of people reshaping their lives to reduce waste. It's making a new market for zero-waste businesses that are springing up across the English capital.
This is London's zero-waste top-up truck. It used to deliver morning milk to bleary-eyed Londoners. Now it's got a new lease of life as an electric-powered, package-free goods delivery truck. After being furloughed from her sales job in 2020, Ella Schoen used savings to start her new business delivering package-free food and household products around London in a former milk float.
So the idea is essentially to make it easier for people to shop zero waste. So they make a booking and I bring it to them. They bring their containers outside, they tell their neighbours, the neighbours jump on board. We also kind of post our locations on our website, and so other people can kind of get involved and fill up in somewhere that's nearer them.
Customers book a visit from the top-up truck online and then purchase goods such as lentils, pasta, olive oil and shampoo using their own containers. Sean is aiming to meet a demand which is rapidly growing. From a low base a decade ago, the market for unpackaged bulk goods could hit $1.5 billion by 2030 in the European Union, according to a report by Zero Waste Europe. The average UK household struggles to recycle even half of its waste. But recycling manager Andrew Zabala is just one of a growing number of Londoners who are reshaping their lives to reduce waste. He now manages to fit a month's worth of non-recyclable waste into a jam jar.
This is my laundry liquid bottle that I've used all the last 3 years.
So I probably saved about 30 bottles in 3 years. Not many bottles, but if you times it by number of households that could do this, we could save billions of plastic bottles a year just by having a refill attitude to shopping. So recycling is good, but refilling is much better and reusing is much better.
As the zero waste movement gains popularity in the UK capital, Ella Sean is planning a crowdfunding campaign to grow her top-up truck business and hopes her work will inspire even more people to go as waste-free as possible.
Pubs, restaurants and shops remain closed in England, but there's a change to the rules for meeting in outdoor spaces. NTD's Jane Worrell reports.
Spring has just about sprung and restrictions are starting to lift a little. For outdoor socialising, it's allowed now to meet another person outdoors, in the words of the government guidance, for recreation. Previously, it was just for exercise.
It means you can meet one other person outside your household for a coffee or a picnic. The rule of 6 outdoors will come back later on in the month.
There's still a wait before things become more normal.
I'd rather wait and not see another lockdown, anything rather than another lockdown. Otherwise, I just have to go walking round and round this park forever. I might obviously see my wife every day, and that's lovely, but we're going to get together with our kids and our grandkids, and we'll have to wait another 3 weeks for that.
We're really happy to meet friends now instead of just talking on the phone and Zooming, to be together in person.
Woke up and felt exactly the same this morning as I did yesterday morning. I've had the vaccine, I've had coronavirus.
I think government has done all it can, and we just have to be patient and take it, one step at a time. So slowly looking at dates, looking at when the restaurants will open and all the rest.
Pub gardens and outdoor dining are set to return in mid-April. Before that, the rule of 6 comes back on March 29th outdoors, so 6 people can meet, or 2 households are allowed to meet outside even if their total number comes to more than 6. That's when outdoor sports will start too. The hope is for all legal limits on social contact to eventually be relaxed by June the 21st. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
A Michelin star chef out of a job is putting his culinary talents to work in a new kitchen. He's taken up a post inside a hospital cafeteria near Berlin. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Chef Peter Frushammer is swapping a classic commercial kitchen for a hospital cafeteria outside Berlin. He was the sommelier at his wife's restaurant, but it's been closed for months due to the pandemic.
A dish like the black salsify chips was never cooked here before, and this is the personal kickoff so that patients realize, oh, there is someone there, a team of cooks that likes to prepare food with love.
The Berlin chef held a Michelin star between 1985 and 1994. He arrived at Bad Belzig's Ernst von Bergmann clinic last fall. He took the new job rather than be unemployed.
I prefer preparing dishes with a spoon rather than a pipette, and I like to cook spontaneously. I don't like designing a dish for 2 weeks until it's finally fit to be shown.
Looking around at the empty dining tables in his restaurant, Frushammer says he notices the effects of the pandemic more than in the hospital kitchen. Germans are anxiously awaiting Chancellor Angela Merkel's announcements on the latest pandemic restrictions on March 3rd.
I believe this is soul food. I give my heart so that people feel good and it reaches patients' souls. Since we only use fresh products, I believe that what we cook is healthy. I am convinced that within our limits, we make a contribution towards patients' recoveries.
His wife hopes to be able to reopen the restaurant by Easter. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A koala in Australia has received the world's first prosthetic foot specially designed for him. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Triumph, a male koala, was born without a right foot. He was rescued in 2017 in New South Wales by vet nurse Marley Christian, who found him next to his dying mother. Christian became his primary caregiver at Lismore's Friends of the Koala Center and searched for a solution to his missing foot. Christian never expected that the answer to Triumph's woes was just down the road. Local dental prosthetist John Dolman had heard of Triumph's dilemma and volunteered to build him a working prosthetic foot.
Well, the foot, I know Marley, and Marley was telling me at one stage that they have a little koala here at Friends of the Koala in Lismore, and he was born without a foot. And the next time I saw Marley, I thought to myself, surely I can have a go at manufacturing something for him, because that's what I do. I make dentures for people.
Christian said she was wary at first, but welcomed Dolman's efforts. According to Christian, Triumph became a whole new koala once the pink prosthetic was attached in early 2021.
Once I put the little boot on him and he did this little jump and then he was running around and climbing, I actually cried. It's the best thing that ever happened, and I would do absolutely anything for this boy. He's really worth it.
Jolman is currently in the process of improving his design for Triumph, but says the koala seems comfortable with his current prosthesis. Triumph is nearly 5 years old and will need to spend the rest of his life in captivity. Most likely, he'll remain under Christian's care. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan. Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.